This is Paul Moody, and you're listening to Fulham Focus Podcast.
Hello, welcome to the Fulham Focus Podcast. I'm Jmac, your host. Not sure about you, but I can imagine you're all still feeling rather buzzy about their away win at Leicester. But alas, there is little time to get too carried away, for our focus now turns to our next mission against Manchester City this Saturday at 3 p.m. So with me to discuss this walk in the park are Matthew Statto and sexual Morgan Colton, with a side dish of Frenchie and Danny discussing the Fulham career of Diomansy Kamara. All on the other side of this noise.
Fulham.
And I just want to say, just off air there, Stato just asked, why aren't you not sexual? And I'm going to say, Stato, that you absolutely are. I'm really sorry for not giving you a good old pun there, mate. Sorry about that. So, Parker and Guardiola have something in common. They are both managers who have all struggled to get results this season, as Man City now sit 11th with just 4 wins from 9 games. Spurs and Leicester have both beaten them already, and Leeds and West Ham have drawn with them. So there are points to be had potentially there. It's going to be hard, particularly when you consider we are off the back of a win against 4th place Leicester. Is it crazy, Morgan, I'll go to you first, to think we can get something from this game?
Yeah, mildly. I mean, Man City away, it's
okay.
It's it's never going to be an easy game. We've proven that in recent years, but crazy things do happen. This whole year's been crazy. Why not just one more crazy thing? Obviously, they are just off the back of a 5-0 home win against a team in the same area as us. But we put in a very, very good performance against Leicester. And I think if we keep to that same game plan and, we get a bit of luck here and there, yeah, why not? Christmas miracles. We're in that season now. I'm willing to admit it's Christmas season. So let's go with it.
Lovely. What are your thoughts on it, Stato, mate? Do you think with any luck we stick to the same sort of counter-attacking system that we had, very direct approach against Leicester, we can potentially possibly salvage a draw out of this? I know it's crazy. I mean, we're all talking a bit crazy, but just why not? Let's just be a bit.
Yeah, so don't get me wrong. The win against Leicester was fantastic, and it's the best we played all season. But at the same time, this is Man City we're talking about. They may not be at their scintillating best, and they're far from the team they were a couple of seasons ago. But they're still one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the country and one of the best teams in Europe, therefore the world. So it's a big step up from Leicester, and we'll need an even bigger performance if we want to come away with anything at all.
Yeah, I mean, this season has been their most inconsistent start under Guardiola. If we were going to pretend for a minute that we could get something out of this game, I mean, like I said, winning 4 out of the 9, drawing 3 and losing 2 in their 9 opening games. Now, lack of goals, I'll just talk about their season so far. Lack of goals has been a big issue. I mean, last season they averaged 2.7 goals per game. Currently, so far this season, they're averaging 1.6 goals, a major difference from what they're used to. I mean, lack of goals could be attributed to the loss of David Silva, their creative midfielder, after a very successful spell with City, obviously, and the loss of, in the past, Silva and company, along with the aging Aguero. It does seem to show that the club are very much in a transition period at the moment, and a changing of the guard, if you will. And having already qualified from their Champions League group with 2 games to spare, I mean, actually, they drew with Porto the other night, didn't they? That's right, yeah. So a luxury that allows them to rest key players during midweek games, and I just like to think of what you think of Pep's season so far, Stats. I'll go straight back to you with that. I mean, it's arguably, I think actually statistically, his worst start since Mark Hughes. Their worst starts.
It's a very interesting time for Guardiola and Man City. As you mentioned, they're in somewhat of a transition period. They've lost their key leaders, company, Silva, Aguero. Well, not Aguero, but he's a kind of more of a bit part player at the moment because of injuries and because he's getting older. And when you kind of lose the core spine of a team like that, and you're having to transition and kind of rebuild a team and set up in a different way, it takes time. And Sir Alex Ferguson, he was the master of this. He went through so many different teams throughout his successful career. He started off with the team in the early 90s with Steve Bruce and Mark Hughes, and that kind of transitioned into the Cantoners and the class of 92, and then towards the whole Ronaldo Rooney era. And with Pep, he's never stuck around at a team long enough to kind of rebuild a team. with the club he's currently at with Barcelona. He had a successful phase. He moved on to Bayern. He had a successful phase with Bayern. Then he moved on to City. This is kind of the first time he's stuck around at a club and is kind of looking to kind of overhaul it and create a second successful spell. So, I think we've caught City at a good time where they're currently at. As you mentioned, it's a changing of the guard. Their good successful phases, I wouldn't say it's coming to an end, but it's moving on to the start of a new one, which may take a season or two to get going. So I think if there was any time to play Man City, it would be now during this period when nothing's quite settled in that team yet.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. They still look absolutely shit hot. I mean, Mahrez scored a hat-trick in his last game. It was an incredible performance by them against Burnley. But yeah, I know what you mean. There is just, if there was any chance of getting something, it would probably be this season. I know Pep recently extended his contract to 2 years. A lot of people saying that's because Messi's on his way in. That's probably very likely. I'm not sure. But there is just a vibe that potentially is a bit of a rocky road for them at the moment. I'll be interested to know your thoughts on this, Morgan. I'd just like to quickly get your thoughts on Guardiola. Do you think there's an argument here that Pep Guardiola has actually been dining out on the players inherited for quite a while? Because I feel he spent about, nearly $500 million on fullbacks or what have you. But I feel like if you look at the players that are always standing out for a Manchester City team, it's De Bruyne, it's Sterling, it's Aguero. This is the same, and company before he left. These are the same players that actually Pep Guardiola inherited. I'm just basically chucking a ball at you, saying if you think there's a bit of a fraudiola.
I don't think I'd go down the fraudiola route, just purely because regardless of whether you have these, great individual players, you need to make them work as a team. And we've seen that a lot. There are plenty of teams out there where they have great individual players, but if they don't have the right manager, handling them, they don't play well together. And clearly Guardiola has done that. And whilst this season has been slightly rocky, if you look at their home record, it's, the loss against Leicester and they drew against Liverpool, but they've won every other home game, I think, this season. And we've also got to remember that, they only had a month off between the those last few Champions League games when they played them in Portugal and the start of the Premier League season. So much like us, they've had a very short close season and coming off the back of so many games. And let's face it, when you're playing top level Premier League and Champions League, they're high quality, higher intensity games than we're getting in the Championship. Yes, they've got a big squad, they've got a quality squad, but for any players like that, they do need a rest because they leave themselves out on the pitch for the most part when they play matches. And, to then not really have a rest before pre-season starts is pretty brutal for them. And I'm not trying to sort of make excuses for Guardiola. I think he's a great manager, coach, what do you want to call him these days. But I think, when you look at the table, they're 3 points off fourth. It's still early days. They had a bit of a, recovery time to start the season, and I think you have to look at their performance against Burnley last weekend to realise Guardiola's not done there. There is a bit of a transition, but he's bringing in some new players, this and that, and they'll be challenging for top two this season. If not, looking at the state of Liverpool's injury list, I don't think Spurs will hold out, nor Chelsea, and I think they probably will end up winning it, to be fair.
Yeah, the only reason I mention it is just because I've heard a few friends in the past talk about Guardiola. I don't believe that actually he's a fraud, but I just like to sort of throw out the idea that he, the players that have been playing exceptionally well are still the players he inherited. And obviously the style's fantastic. He reached the Centurions 2 seasons ago, and that was wonderful. All right, guys, let's talk about Tosin Adarabioyo really quickly. He returns to his former employers for the first time. Many City fans were sad to see him leave for such a, he was the very popular player for them. And how do you think he's done so far? I'll go to you with this, Statto. He had a very good game against Leicester. There's a really good highlight reel of his work in the last game.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's gone quite under the radar with us, if anything. He came in quite late in the transfer window, as we know, quite a low price. Our defence was a shambles, so it's like, well, what can this young defender bring to this team who's played predominantly in the Championship? And he started off next to Ream and he played well against Sheffield United, and now him and Anderson seem to be forming quite a strong partnership, and they seem to complement each other quite well. I've spoken before about the whole alpha centre back partnership thing, and that's what Anderson seems to be. Seems to be this big dominating centre back. And much like with Hangeland and Hughes, Hangeland being the alpha, Hughes was kind of the good beta centre back, the good partnership who can kind of complement what Anderson lacks. And I think he started incredibly well, and Leicester was by far his best game.
Yeah, I think when you look at a player like Tosin, who I don't think he'd ever played a senior game, certainly not a senior league game for Man City, maybe a couple of League Cup games or whatever. But the amount of plaudits he was getting from the Man City fans upon him joining us shows you that he is an exciting player. And obviously we covered this back when we did sign him. But for a player who never actually played for the first team, it was very impressive to see how high, in such regard he was held in by the Man City fans. So, and I think, it won't be a case of where he's going back there to prove a point. He'll be going back there to help, give us as solid a defensive display as we can against a team who are as strong going forward as Man City. And he'll know, the tactics, he'll know the style. But the thing is, we all know the style and the tactics. It's about stopping those individual players from basically exerting their excellence on the game. So he will have an idea. He may not have trained with many of these players before if he was playing with the under-23s or, when he was on loan. But I think, he'll want to make an impression. But I don't think that's any different from any other game that he plays in, because he's a young centre-back who's been thrown into the Premier League this season in a team struggling to keep clean sheets. And he's done exceptionally well. And I think his partnership with Anderson, whilst new, is certainly blossoming. And I think, if we saw a few other bits, it's a very exciting, defensive centre-back partnership that we have in our team. And I just really hope that it carries on in that way.
And an absolute steal for the price as well. I mean, it's refreshing us to see grab a bargain. What it seems like.
You wonder why it was so cheap. I mean, unless he had a release clause or something like, or maybe it was coming to the end of his contract or whatever. Unusual.
I think at the age of 23, he's probably looking at his career, and if he's not breaking into the City team by now, he's wondering when that will happen and if it would have happened. And when a Premier League club like us, quite a lower level one, comes along and expresses interest, I think he's going to want to pounce that chance to get regular first team Premier League football. He's kind of one of the first wave of City academy players that have come through since they've had all the Abu Dhabi money. They've invested a lot of money into their youth setup, and it's kind of only now all these youth players are coming through. And Phil Foden, Tosin, Roy Delapson's coming through soon as a striker. Yep. Keep an eye out for him. And these first wave of players are coming through, and you can kind of see in Tosin's style of play that he's been under the kind of the Pep Guardiola school of footballing, and it's a fantastic bargain that we've got him on, to be honest. So yeah, it's all good that we've got him here.
Yeah, and I'm enjoying the prospect of him and Anderson more than I am with Torpedo, or Marlon as well. I mean, I feel like we've done quite well so far. But I mean, that remains to be said. Let's talk about his counterpart, Anderson, really quickly. I want to get your thoughts on the lineup for this game, lads. And the first thing, I think the best place to go is, would you keep Anderson with the armband if Tom Cairney isn't playing for this game, Morgs?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wouldn't change anything from Monday night. I think unless there's any injuries or whatever, you have to stick with that lineup, and you have to stick with that style, and you have to get the players, drum it into them. Obviously, Mitro will be looking to get back into the starting lineup. There's no reason to suggest that he should be for this game, and not because of him lacking quality, but just simply because we are playing another game against a high quality team. We are away. We will have to, forfeit a lot of possession in it and really hit Man City on the quick break. And I think if anything was shown on Monday night was just after Mitro came on, and in that last minute where Schmeichel came up for the corner, and we had that opportunity to break with the last sort of few seconds of the game, and Mitro got the ball, and it was like it was like an oil tanker just starting getting going. He doesn't have pace. That is not his style, and in the the way we're having to play now, it doesn't suit him at all. And I think it's going to be tricky for him to get back in the team whilst we're playing in this way. I think there'll be opportunities for him to get back, but we need to have that quick, nippy front man. And I think whilst Bobby Decordova-Reid has had his critics through the last season and a half, and rightly so. I mean, I've been one of them. I think we've all been one of them at one stage or another.
Absolutely, yeah.
He certainly does fit the mold of a nippy frontman. So whilst he may not be a better player than Mitro, he certainly fits the mold better for this style. So I think we'll see the same lineup, but whether we keep going like this, in this manner for every game, I don't think so. I think it's just when we play the best teams, we need to adapt, and we've done that well.
Well, it makes you wonder, actually, talking about strikers, if we're in January, we might be looking for someone a bit nippier, as you say. But that January transfers is a story for another podcast. Stats, I'll go with you. What would you like to see from this? Would you go for an unchanged lineup? Did you like Cavallaro in that false nine sort of position?
Yes, there's a couple of aspects to this. The first is it worked well against Leicester, so keep it the same. But then the second thing is Parker himself. What we've seen with Parker since he's been in charge is he's quite a reactive type of manager, in the sense that he doesn't just because it worked last week doesn't mean he's going to set up the same this week. He'll pick the team that he thinks will perform to their best against Man City, whether that's playing Bobby Reid as in a right wing back position again with Cavallaro as a false nine, or whether that's bringing Mitrovic in to hold up the play, or playing Tom Cairney to hold up the ball and keep the ball at his feet a bit more. We kind of don't know, and that's both frustrating and a good. It's both a frustrating thing and a good thing about Parker, because there is that unpredictability, but at the same time, we want a constant starting 11 that we know will perform week in, week out. But I guess when it comes to these big teams like Man City, you do need to react to them rather than just play our usual football, because it just won't work.
No, for sure. And, it's interesting to see what will happen. I mean, as you say, Parker's been very reactionary of changing the lineup. I feel that there's going to be two styles, definitely. I think the lineup that we had against Leicester is the sort of lineup you put out for these types of games. And then when we play the mid-table, the lesser teams, you can go back to that possession play that we're used to, the sort of, building up slowly from the back. But I can see us definitely going a lot more direct and being exactly like we were with Leicester with this. I wouldn't change anything. I really wouldn't. It was just, I think that's the best performance. I mean, which is arguably probably the biggest result we've had for a very long time. I can't remember last time we beat a top 4, top 6 team.
That was certainly the best result from sort of since we got relegated in whatever it was, 2013-14. I mean, you made a point then about when we come up against lesser teams, we might not play that style. Apart from those three below us, are there any lesser teams than us? I mean, we're still playing teams every week. We're going to be playing teams that have played better than us this season. And, we've always said, after, 2 seasons ago when we thought we were trying to buy ourselves a place in the Premier League in terms of staying up.
That's right.
And failed miserably. This season, it's very much about consolidation, and playing the style we are playing is a very consolidation style football. So, do we keep this going? Obviously, we have to change it up, otherwise teams will just get the hang of it. But I mean, Leicester won the Premier League playing this style of football, proper counter-attacking football. I think they're during that season, I think their average possession was probably about 40% a game. They didn't play possession football, and obviously it worked for them. Do we have we shifted away from that now, knowing that the teams that we're playing against will eat us for breakfast essentially if we try and outplay them? So maybe this is just I want to say a new era, but it's just a new style that we're going to implement moving forward. And that does raise the question: do we need a new striker come January that fits the role more, or is Mitro going to sort of start gelling into the system? And maybe the reason he hasn't started the last couple of games is more the fact that he's actually learning the system now.
I think also the result against Leicester kind of reminded us what it's like to be a mid-table team. What I mean by that is when we were a successful Premier League team, back in the day, back 2013.
Back in day.
Back in the day. We were. That's what we were. We were a mid-table Premier League team. The highest we came was 7th. We came 12th, 13th, whatever. And by doing we finished in those positions by getting results like this against Leicester. And we kind of lost our way a bit because obviously we went into the Championship, barring those first couple of seasons. In the Championship, we won the majority of our games because we were an upper tier Championship team. And as fans, as a club, we were used to winning most games week in, week out. And then we went to the Premier League and we lost every game. And that was a rubbish feeling. We're back to the Championship, won all the games, and now we're kind of here. And it's kind of reminding the club that to be a successful Premier League team, you win some, you lose some, but the ones you win, and when you get chances to win, you take those chances and you put in those good performances. And it was kind of really refreshing to see that because, like you said, it's probably the first time we've seen a game like that since 2012, 2013.
Yeah, and it's as you say, Morgs, I really hope it is a corner turn and we do actually just stick to this. I was listening to the commentary on the radio because I was at work for the Leicester game. Unfortunately, I couldn't watch it. I watched the highlights, of course. But, they kept saying our organised defence about 5 times. They said our quick counter-attack, how deadly we look on the break. And I would trade that done effectively more than possession. It's always been something I prefer to watch and something I've always been more comfortable with Fulham doing, in my honesty. But, yeah, I really hope that's something that's more our plan A now, to be honest. And, you win some, you lose them, but we actually take the chances, like you say, Statto. All right, well, let's move this on to Danny and Frenchie, who are going to do a lovely player focus, of Diomansy Kamara. Take it away, Mr. French.
Fulham.
Right, I've got Danny with me once again to talk about the Fulham career of an ex-Fulham hero of ours. And who better to discuss as we prepare for a match against Manchester City than Diomansy Kamara. Danny, how you doing, mate?
Hello, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, all good. Let's do this one then. So, in the summer of 2007, Lawrie Sanchez attempted to rebuild the squad left behind by Chris Coleman, who had been sacked at the end of the previous season with a few games to go. And in addition to signing half of his Northern Ireland squad that had beaten both Spain and England, he spent £6 million on West Brom forward Diomansy Kamara. A more mobile attacker, I feel, was something the squad had lacked for quite some time, so I was quite excited by this. How did you feel when he joined, and how did you generally feel about the team around that time?
It was the exciting transfer window, wasn't it? Because we were used to Chris Coleman feeding off of quite a tight budget for a number of seasons, and the team seemed to go in decline every single year. We used to replace a good player with a player of inferior quality every single season. And it got to a point where I think Chris Coleman's job was nigh on impossible. A bit harsh when you look back that he was sacked, because I think he still probably would have kept us up. But then we went into the summer and obviously Sanchez was given this big transfer kitty to spend. And it was about 30 million, I believe. And when you look back at the players we were signing, Stephen Davis came with a lot of potential. Obviously went on to have a good career. Danny Murphy came in and Chris Baird, Konchesky was quite a high-profile fullback at the time. And Diomansy Kamara was actually the big name of them all. He was the big summer signing, wasn't he? £6 million. And at that time, it was quite a lot of money. I do feel that Kamara probably didn't fit into Sanchez's style. He was quite a traditional manager, wasn't he? That liked the big lump up front. And having someone like Kamara didn't really fit into that sort of category. Wasn't the type of winger that would cross the ball. And he wasn't the type of striker that could play the target man role. So it was a bit of an odd signing in terms of the way Sanchez was going to set us up. But no, it was a very exciting transfer window. And I was very optimistic going into that season.
Am I right in saying as well that was the same transfer window that we bought in Shefki Kuki?
I think you're right. Because I remember playing Reading at home around November sort of time.
Yeah.
And it was one of the crucial wins of the season because obviously we stayed up at Reading's expense. And he flicked on the ball for Simon Davis down the wing in injury time to seal that win.
That's right,
and then Simon Davis crossed it for Healy to tap it in. So, yeah. No, you're right. He was a Sanchez signing. Yeah. I met him once, actually. Back in my days when I was in the building trade, we were working in a house in Catford. And I worked with a couple of Albanians who obviously knew Kuchi because he come from Albanian descent, despite playing for Finland. And they went running down the road because his car had broken down.
Oh, really?
And they were really excited to meet him. And I said to him at the time, I'm a Fulham supporter. And he shook my hand and he said, oh, lovely to meet you. That was it, really. And then I just thought, well, I'm going to go now because I don't think you've played yet.
That was a bizarre time, but it's a very different signing to Kamara. But I suppose if those two could have worked up front as a front two, it wouldn't have been that bad, would it? You know, the classic big man, little man, and the flick-ons that Kuki could have got and Kamara to run onto. But that's my kind of memory of him playing for West Brom, was him scoring the type of goal that we'll come on to talking about in a minute, you know, his big Hollywood moment, but just running on and running half the length of the pitch. And he was never kind of a delicate finisher, was he? He was a sort who would just put his laces through the ball, and I liked that. I was excited when we signed him for that reason as well, just because I thought we had a pacey finisher on our hands.
Yeah, we just lost Barmorte a few months before that, hadn't we? I think it was in the January before that. So I did feel maybe he could have been that kind of replacement, that kind of style. Going back to what you said about Kucci and Kamara being a partnership, we was obviously unlucky to lose McBride when we did, because I think McBride was the ideal kind of target man for a Sanchez team. And obviously we had David Healy come in as well, who was supposed to be the goal scorer. But yeah, it just, for some reason or another, in those first few months, I never felt like Kamara really established himself as part of the first 11. And it was only the latter stages of that season, obviously we'll get onto his famous moment later in the show, but he was never really he was never really going to make his claim to get into the first team. He was a bench player at best for a large part of that season.
He was. Of course, Lawrie Sanchez's reign as manager was absolutely appalling and didn't last long at all. But the first memory I have of Kamara playing in that Sanchez team that season is his looping overhead kick equaliser against Spurs in the last minute. Gareth Bale might have scored 1 or 2 that game as well. And it felt that day like we did perhaps have something to cling on to in terms of excitement in that Sanchez team. Obviously wasn't to be in the end, but what are your memories of that goal?
Well, I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It came in injury time, didn't it? And obviously it was a 3-3 draw. It was end-to-end, and it was a very dramatic way to end the game. He loved a dramatic finish, didn't he, Kamara? But I think it's a very underrated goal. Obviously, as Fulham fans, when we do On This Day tweets and we put it out there, it's fondly remembered. It's not one of those where the pace is on the ball and all he has to do is make connection with it. It's a long throw-in, isn't it? And then someone heads it, but they head it back. So it's going back towards our keeper. It's going away from goal. And he has to delicately loop it over Paul Robinson's head. I mean, inch perfect. You know, it's phenomenal technique. I don't think he would be able to do it again if he tried 100 times. But when it counted, he did pull it off. And for me, it's one of our greatest Premier League goals.
It just makes you wonder why he was a squad player and why he wasn't just a better player for Fulham when he had that in his locker.
To be honest with you, I think some players have a knack of coming up with individual moments of brilliance in one-off games. But to be a starter, really, you've got to be consistent. Normally a manager will go for that player that's 7 out of 10 every single week. You know, not outstanding, but never going to let him down. And I think with Kamara, he was a bit unpredictable and a bit inconsistent and was more of a impact player rather than somebody that could affect a game from the start. But maybe because he was quick and he was more favourable when players were tiring. I don't know what it is. I think if you play in the Premier League, you know, you're a Premier League player in your own right and you've clearly got some talent about you. And on your day, I don't think there's much between you and the players that play for the big teams. But the difference between the players that play for the big teams and the players that play for Fulham is that their day is every single week, whereas ours are hit and miss. And that's why they don't play at the very top. And I feel that's probably Kamara's downfall. He was just not consistent enough.
I think that's fair. Well, before too long, Lawrie Sanchez was gone. Roy Hodgson was in, and eventually we got going in February when Jimmy Bullard and Brian McBride came back from injury. Results were still mixed until that famous final run-in. None more famous than that Man City game, though, where relegation would be confirmed if we'd lost the game. At 2-0 down at half-time, the fat lady was clearing her throat. Talk me through what happened next.
Couldn't believe it. I'll never forget that day. I'm one of the games that I really regret not being at. I was at my nan and granddad's house, following it on the scores coming in. And we were 2-0 down at half time, and I thought, I saw this. So now I left to go home thinking, well, we're down. I got off the bus at the other end, and I saw it was 2-2, and I was like, bloody hell, where's that come from? So I ran home from the bus stop to my house, got in as it was approaching the 90th minute. And straight away, I put Gillette Soccer Saturday on. I couldn't believe it. Jeff Stelling, my mum walks in the front room. Jeff Stelling goes to Paul Merson. What a goal! Can't believe it. They've only gone and done it. And I think he throws a pen at the table. He's so excited. I couldn't believe it. The jumping up and down. The reaction from my living room has never been quite like that moment. And to me, if we was going to rate his career without the likes of the Man City game, it would probably be really low because it was quite insignificant for a lot of it. But how can you give him a low score when, in my opinion, he gave us our greatest moment of the Premier League era when he scored that Man City goal? It was just absolutely incredible.
It was a hell of a finish as well. I mean, he got the first goal, didn't he, for us? Or was it the second one? No, he got the first goal, and then there was the Danny Murphy missed penalty, but he scored the rebound. And I just remember Danny Murphy threading the ball through to him, and he still had lots to do. He was on the halfway line when he picked the ball up pretty much, and just crashed his foot through that ball, and no keeper was stopping that. And I just remember the camera goes round, doesn't it? And Roy Hodgson leaps up in the air, and Sven's head just drops into his lap, like, how on earth have we lost this game? And from that point on, it was on, wasn't it? Staying up was on.
Well, we was dead and buried at half time, and out of nowhere, we turned it around. And I think at the time, we were relegated because not only were we losing, but Birmingham and Reading were both winning. And by the time it got around to the end of the game, obviously we turned our result around, and I think theirs has gone the other way. So it just completely swung the momentum in our favour. And if you're not going to believe it's possible after pulling off a result like that, then you're never going to have optimism, are you? So it was a turning point in what turned out to be the greatest period of our club's history. And Kamara just played such a big part in that. And I'll never forget that moment. Never forget it. I really, really gutted I wasn't there, because you see it on the TV and you see the way the fans react. Honestly, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. It was just very, very special. And that's why I love supporting a club like Fulham. We're not talking here about winning titles. Just won our 5th title in a row. We're talking about one of our greatest moments of our history being defying the odds to survive. And as a club, we're so used to doing that. And our older generations of fans have been through much more meaningful uses of the word survive, just surviving as a club. And I think that day just sums up what's so great about supporting Fulham, that we can do it our way and achieve the impossible, if you like. And it may be not the impossible to a big club, but the impossible for us. What can you say? It was just a very proud moment to be a Fulham fan, which is hard to explain because we ended up finishing 4th from bottom. But that's why a big club will never get it. They'll never understand what it's like to support Fulham.
Without that goal, life as a Fulham fan over the next few years would have just been really different. We'd have gone down that season. We wouldn't have had Europe. Roy probably would have left. And God knows, it would have just been a completely different history for the club, wouldn't it? That it was such an important goal, knowing what was to come.
Well, we would have signed Richard Stearman about 4 years younger, and that probably would have pulled off a really good signing. No,
we'd have got his best years.
Yeah, we'd have got him in his prime. It just turned out to be the greatest roller coaster you could imagine, didn't it? I don't think anyone could really believe it was possible. I suppose Leicester have obviously done something even more incredible since, because they survived and then went on to win the Premier League. But at the time, what we did seemed impossible. To go from surviving to record-breaking league position and then get into a Europa League final, all in the space of 2 years, just seemed impossible job. And obviously, without the Great Escape, it wouldn't have happened. So I think Diomansy Kamara without ever being a really important player in any of the seasons he played for us, has gone down in our history for scoring arguably one of the most important goals ever. So quite a unique career, really, compared to a lot of players that have played for us.
This is the great thing about sport, though, and for all that Fulham supporters might moan and bitch and think that we don't have much success, and when we're in the Premier League these days, we're always at the wrong end of the table. But just to go from relegation certainties that season to somehow pulling off that win at Man City, to then going on to stay up, and then going on to build a team that was to reach Europe the following season, and then in Europe get to the final. It's just, that's our fairy tale, really, isn't it? I don't think, aside from winning that European final, I don't think it would ever get any better than that for a Fulham supporter.
No, I don't think it would. But I think that squad in particular was quite clearly a case of being mismanaged. They wasn't a rubbish team. It was strange that we were down the bottom for as long as we was, and all it took was a couple of tweaks in the January, Hangeland and people like that coming in to transform it. When you think about it, we had players like Konchesky, Aaron Hughes, Murphy that went on to play in the Europa League final. So there was a core of players already at the club. So we had the team, we just maybe didn't have the manager to back it up. And obviously Roy Hodgson come in, and even though Roy Hodgson is a fantastic manager, he did a phenomenal job to turn it around as quickly as he did.
Well, just really quickly, the next season after the Man City game, of course, we reached Europe, as we've just said. Kamara scored a winner away at Newcastle that season. And then, of course, there were some key goals in our Europa group games too, as we made it out the group and began to make our way to the final. I think it's fair to say that he certainly played his part more than a lot of players in the history of Fulham Football Club.
Well, yeah, and we've really focused on that Man City goal because of obviously what it meant. But when you go through those goals that he did score, even the overhead kick that we've already touched on was a priceless point. We stayed up on goal difference in the end. So even that was a massive goal at the time. And he wasn't the type of player to score consolation goals, was he? He would always come up with that magic moment when it mattered. It didn't happen often, but when it did happen, it seemed to be a significant goal. The Newcastle goal was the reason we got into the Europa League in the first place, because we wouldn't have finished 7th without that goal. Spurs would have overtaken us. So it was a massive win in the penultimate game of the season. And then, of course, he scores the goal. The Roman one, I suppose, is a bit of irrelevant because we lost that game. But the Sofia goal, we were 1-0 down in that game, and you could argue that they were the easiest team in our group on paper. And if we had lost that game, I think it would have been a really poor start to the group stage. So the fact that he got us up and running with an equaliser and a point just showed that he had something to offer to that team. And I've got a theory that he shouldn't have gone in the January that season. We had Andy Johnson out injured. We signed a Kaka on loan in the January who couldn't play in Europe. So essentially, we was pinning all our hopes on Zamora and Gira not getting injured. We didn't really have anyone else. I think we might have had David Elm. So I think we missed a trick a little bit by loaning Kamara out in the January and not keeping him, given his track record of coming off the bench and making an impact. What a sub he would have been to have in the Europa League final as players were tiring, particularly with Zamora being injured. So I think that is probably one of the biggest mistakes Hodgson made, was letting him go in the January.
Just wonder, though, whether or not he asked to go, because he wasn't really featuring much. He was down the pecking order. And I don't even remember him going on loan to Celtic that January, to be honest. But I think with hindsight and looking at your theory on paper, it certainly makes sense. That would have been beneficial to Fulham. I just wonder whether it was more the player that wanted to go.
Well, I'd like to know his position on it now, given hindsight. Obviously, at the time, he must have been frustrated, but could have had the opportunity to play in the Europa League final. So I think being cruel to be kind and keeping him might have actually worked out better for both. We wouldn't have been in that position without his contributions originally. So I'll always be grateful for what he did for Fulham. We've seen so many ups and downs as Fulham supporters, but to see what we thought was the impossible, it's unforgettable.
Speaking about unforgettable, or more forgettable, actually, he also went on loan to Leicester and then left permanently on a free in July 2011, signed for a Turkish side. I'll have a go at pronouncing it. Eskişehirspor, something like that. I feel like he's another one of these players who snuck out the door at the club with minimal fuss. Do you remember him leaving? And I feel like if he was ever to come back, I think he'd get a really good reception.
Oh, of course he would. Yeah, why wouldn't he? For all the reasons that we've already mentioned. I can't imagine any Fulham fan would have a bad word to say about him. Obviously, constructive criticism. Overall, he wasn't a very consistent player. But it doesn't matter, does it? All you remember is the important moments. And without him being a Fulham player, if he hadn't signed that summer, then we wouldn't have gone on to do what we did. So even though, I suppose, in theory, it wasn't value for money. Technically, it was, because what he gave us in the end was priceless. And I would have paid 30 million, 50 million, 100 million just for him to score those 1 or 2 goals. He's written himself into Fulham folklore. A bit like Rodney McAree. All he had to do was score 1 goal, and now he will never be forgotten. And it's very similar.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, actually. Rodney McAree was a bit part player, wasn't he, during that 96-97 season, and just came up with that one unbelievable goal and one moment. And yeah, that's all it takes. You're absolutely right. So with that in mind then, rate Diomansy Kamara's Fulham career out of 10, as we always do.
Without those important goals, then it probably would have been as low as a 3 or a 4, because I thought he was a very ordinary player. But given what he did for Fulham with those goals, you can't mark him low, can you? I think I would have to give him a 7.5.
I'm going half a point down from you. I'm going to go 7. But as you say, those moments of magic lift his score up to a 7 from what would have been an otherwise pretty nondescript time at the club. But no one's ever going to forget his name, and no one's ever going to forget that goal in particular and what it meant. So, yeah, 7 out of 10 for me. Good stuff, mate. All right, thanks for that. Let's pass back to the main show.
Fulham.
All right, and we're back. Now, Mr. Statto, can you please unravel your stats for us for this game? We've already briefly talked about their season so far, but I'd like to know... Actually, no, Morgan, I'll go to you first, mate. Can you tell us about our record versus Man City?
I can, yeah. We've played them 67 times overall. We've won 17 of them. We've drawn 16 of them. However, we have lost 34 of them. And that, that record hasn't been helped by the fact in the last 10 games, it's produced 9 defeats and 1 draw. Obviously, most of those have come since the Abu Dhabi era has taken over. That 1 draw came back in September 2011, which was 2-2 at the Cottage, with goals from Bobby Zamora and Vincent Kompany's own goal where he sliced it back over his head. Which I think for any Sunday League defenders, that was a classic example of how to do it. Our last win against City at Etihad came 11 years ago in April 2009 when we won 3-1 in the league, when Clint Dempsey scored a couple and Dixon Atuhu scored against his old club. That was actually the first season of City being, uber rich. So that was the, final time that we'd ever played them whilst we were on a similar plateau. Before then, in 2009, results between us in the Premier League were pretty much evenly contested. 1-4, drew 6, lost 5 in that period. However, our last 6 games at the Etihad have resulted in 19 goals conceded and 0 scored. So plenty of room for improvement this time round.
Christ, yeah, that is bad. That is really bad. I mean, it
doesn't get much worse than that, does it? I mean, that's a pretty poor average score as well. That's over 3 goals a game. So,
but was the last time we played City when Tim Ream finished his career with us, or was it a game before that? I can't remember.
Yeah, it was just he finished his career and then I think he played the next game. But he definitely finished his career then. But no,
that's when we all.
It was a quick Neil Warnock-esque retirement.
Yeah. Oh man,
it was a rare Congolo appearance as well, wasn't it?
Did he get injured?
It was a great tackle against Gabriel Jesus. Yeah. I don't know if he got injured that game. Maybe he did actually. Maybe he injured himself.
No, it was the league game after that.
Okay.
in his
But he probably
one
was probably
fair
injured
enough.
then anyway. I mean, he's always injured. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
One
when
day
the guy
he'll be
gets fit, we'll hold a celebration when he finally gets fit, I think.
Yeah. Well, look, before we look at the City players to watch out for, which let's face it is all of them. Let's have City at a glance from you, Statto, please, mate. Give us your work.
Yeah, so I've just got some quick stats here that are quite interesting to look at this season. So as we've already mentioned, they're scoring a lot less compared to last season. 2.7 was the average last year. Now only scoring 1.6, still more than a goal a game. So that's still pretty good going, but significantly less than what City are used to. And they're actually conceding a lot more as well. There's a lot more gaps in that defence now. Last season, on average, they conceded 0.9 goals per game. And at the moment, that figure's currently at 1.2. So,
Wow.
Judging by that stat, we should score against them at least. So, yay,
Yeah.
we'll score at the Etihad.
I might put on a bet for Lookman to score a goal, maybe on Bet365. I'm not sure. Shouldn't really be right.
Probably get decent odds for that.
There are other bookies available.
There are.
Bet Victor,
Bet responsibly. Over 18.
Obviously, we know that they beat Burnley 5-0 in the league last week. Fun extra stat there: they beat Burnley 5-0 in the league at home for the last 4 seasons in a row. And Burnley have got a European place in that time, so a 5-0 dropping by City means nothing in the grand scheme of things. But only one of their wins so far has come from a goal margin of more than 2, and that was that Burnley win. And again, that's kind of showing how little goals they're scoring at the moment. Last season, 14 of their wins came from a goal margin of 2+. And at the moment, we're 9 games in, and only one of those has been. So there's a lack of goals and almost a lack of attacking threat there from City. 67% of the goals they've scored have come in the first half. Doesn't quite bode well for us, given how early we concede goals at the moment.
Sure.
However, the majority, what they concede is between the 15th and the 30th minute mark. So that's kind of a danger zone for us to not concede in at the moment. And points-wise, they're averaging 1.7. And again, that shows that they're not doing as well as they have done in the past, because last season they would be averaging 2.1 points per game. So, another sign that City aren't quite at their strongest at the moment.
Right. And as we go on to the players, Statto, what do you predict the front three is going to be for them this game? Is it going to be, I can imagine De Bruyne is going to play because I think he was rested against Porto. It definitely didn't start. I know that much. The front three that we'll be facing, who do you think it's going to be?
It's an interesting one. It's typical Pep roulette, really. It could be absolutely anything. I don't know if Aguero is fully fit. He's barely played at all this season.
Yeah, he's got a little niggle on his knee, I believe. Funny thing about Aguero, just really quickly, I didn't realise that his father-in-law was the late Diego Maradona. Had no idea about that.
I only found that out on that evening when obviously Maradona died and Man City were playing.
Yeah,
I saw a meme once where Aguero's kid, his dad's Aguero, his granddad's Maradona, and I think his godfather was Messi. I don't know if that was a lie or not. And then the meme was just no pressure, kid.
No, I think that's right. I think no, Messi is the godfather to Aguero's kid. I think I'm actually almost certain of it. Yeah, that is true. God, that's
peak footballing royalty.
Imagine if the kid becomes like a plumber or something. just Barry in the office, you know what I mean? Let's talk about a player.
Barry Aguero.
Barry Aguero. Let's talk about some players we should be watching out for then. Morgan, who would you like to just pinpoint to us that something we should be a bit fearful of and get, Tosin Adebayo on the case?
So I'm gonna pick 2. I'm gonna pick one of the obvious ones, which I think Riyad Mahrez. I think he's one of these players that sometimes goes a little bit under the radar for City, but he's just an excellent forward player. Obviously, he showed it in Leicester, and then the step up, he was used as sort of relatively sparingly, I guess, by City at the start. But this season, he's their top scorer of 4 goals. He is. In the world of expected goals, he's currently at 2 a game, which is a good record for the winger. He's had 21 shots with 10 on target so far this season. And if he plays, he'll be out on the right-hand side, will frequently cut in on his left foot, and which 2 goals have come from that left foot, one with his head, one with his right foot. Anthony Robinson has got to be very careful. Obviously, speed is Robinson's strong point. But obviously between him and, I don't know, is Tosin playing on the left-hand side of our centre-backs? Can I remember? Yeah.
He is, He's the left centre-back and Anderson is to the right, yeah.
But, obviously that's going to be a massive danger point, and Mahrez scores goals. He scores free kicks as well, I think, when De Bruyne is not taking them. And so, he is that big danger man that I would look out for. However, there's also another one who is the young Spaniard, Ferran Torres, who scored his first goal in the Premier League for City last weekend, just as he was about to be taken off. And he played up front against Porto on whatever it was, Tuesday night. Didn't score, but leading the line. Against Burnley, he was playing just on the left-hand side, which, as we know, is where Aina will be coming up against him. And let's not, be around the bush. Aina's not the strongest right back. And we've got to be very careful. This is a young kid who just scored 3 goals against Germany, a full-strength German side in the Nations League. And when I saw on the, on Flash Score, wherever it was I look at, and F. Torres scored 3 goals against Germany, I thought, Fernando's having a bit of a comeback these days. And then it turns out, no, it was a 20-year-old Man City player. And, obviously he's then scored his first goal. He's going to be up for it. I mean, this kid is going to want to impress. And I think he will look at this game. He will look at, who he's coming up against in the right back spot. And I think he could have a bit of a field day if Aina is up to his old tricks. Hopefully, Bobby Reid, if he's playing there and covering again, will help him out. But, we've got to be very careful because I think he's going to be a danger man.
All right. And for you, Statto, mate, anyone you want to pinpoint out to us?
Yeah, so as Morgs mentioned, there's Mahrez, there's Ferran Torres, and if they both play, it's likely Torres will play through the middle or out wide. If he plays out wide, we'll have Jesus to deal with. He's got 2 goals and 1 assist so far this season. If he plays in the middle, we'll likely see Raheem Sterling. Now, we all know what Sterling's about. We'll play out on the left, we'll cut in. His dribbling is kind of one of the best in the world. Finishing, maybe not as good as it could be, but he's still only 23, 24 years old, I think, so he's still actually very young, despite the fact it feels like he's been here for ages. So far this season, he's down as 2 goals and 1 assist, which is quite an underwhelming figure for him so far. Considering last year he managed 20 goals, although he only got 1 assist last year, so he has already levelled his assist tally. But he's still a long way off his goal tally from last year. He's currently on only 1.6 expected goals so far this season, with having 16 shots and only 6 on target. So he's playing well, but not in the red hot fire form that we know him to be in. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on if he does play. And then, of course, we already mentioned his son Barry, but we need to. It's worth talking about Sergio quickly. And if he does play, he's going to be aching to get off the mark to get his first Premier League goal this season. I don't think it's ever taken Aguero 10 games to score his first goal in the Premier League, so we should be a bit wary of that. But 180 goals in 265 games for City so far, we can't ignore that. And even if he's not in his red hot form that he is, and he's 32 years old and he may not be as fast, he's still going to be a massive threat and one we should be aware of. But hey, if we can deal with a pacey aging Jamie Vardy, we can deal with a pacey aging Sergio Aguero, right? Right?
Yeah, no, here. It's not a bad point. Hopefully, all right. Well, another obvious one to talk about is Kevin De Bruyne. I didn't realise his expected assist is currently at 3.13 per game, Statto, which you've put down. If we can somehow keep him quiet, then we might be able to stop him from scoring as well. But 1 goal and 5 assists so far this season for the Belgian playmaker. I mean, he's just one of the best players in the world, so that's obviously one we've got to watch out for. And you've mentioned Gabriel Jesus, who I think will score against us, but I've just got a feeling that City will beat us and they'll be quite comfortable. Then they'll make a substitution. I can see Phil Foden scoring for some reason. It just feels like a Phil Foden scoring game to me. I can just imagine that happening for us. Now, I've mentioned what I think, not necessarily the score, but the result. And I'd like to get your score prediction, please, Morgs.
But are you saying that it'll be 3-0, and then when the game's all done and dusted, Pep will bring on Foden, and we'll just be like, for fuck's sake, all right, there you go.
Something
and then
like that.
Yeah, okay, all right, yeah, no, that sounds good. Look, I mean, prediction-wise, even the most optimistic Fulham fan is going to struggle to predict a win in this one. I'm going to say 3-1 City, and I say that in optimistic terms because that means we've scored a goal against them. And I don't think anything should be read into this game at all. It is just one of those games that if we lose it, we take it on the chin, we move on, and we win our next game. We've had a very good game, and we should draw confidence from the Leicester game. And if we do get something from this game, that would be amazing. But let's not get sort of bogged down by sort of over emotional about losing to a Man City team who are at especially the Etihad are in pretty decent form. So that's
yeah. You say let's lose the City and win our next game. It's Liverpool, mate. It's going to be.
Yeah, but Liverpool haven't got any players. They're going to be playing their under 8s at this point.
Not bad. Maybe you're right. Go on, Statto. What was your score prediction for this one?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier how Burnley, they've lost 5-0 in this fixture for the last 4 seasons running. And I remember Sean Dyche, I think, saying after one of them, was like, he doesn't really care about this result. They just brush it off and move on to the next one. And I haven't looked it up, but I'd guarantee the next game, probably at Turf Moor, they probably beat a Crystal Palace type team 1-0 or 2-1, and they just bounced back and got on with their season. So if we do lose 5-0, it's not the end of the world. It happens. It's Man City. If we catch them on a good day, it's just the way it goes. However, I don't think that's going to be the case. We're going to lose. I think we're going to lose. But I think after seeing how good we can play against a good team like Leicester, I think we'll put in a good spirited performance. And I agree with Morgs. I think it will be a spirited 3-1 loss. We'll get that goal, but it'll just be a 3-1 loss and we'll move on.
All right, that's fair enough, lads. I'm going to be slightly more optimistic and just say 2-1. I just hope to think that we've ironed out those. You're
living in a fancy land, mate.
Sit down, mate. Sit down. Bloody hell. No,
have another one.
Thinking that. I'm just thinking, I'm just trying to, be positive, really. I think
I would say a 2-1 defeat at the Etihad in the current state would be a very positive result. I think, we won't take anything from the actual the goals against Colin, but I think, we will have to look at the performance. And if the players look like they're up for it, and if they put in a spirited performance, stick to the game plan, and do exactly what Scott's asked of them, then we can't have any complaints. If individual brilliance beats us, so be it. But we want to see from those players, that they're committed to giving their best shot at beating this team.
Yeah. Well, let's hope. Let's hope, and hopefully we'll see some sort of, I don't know, just some sort of evolution from Leicester. Even if it is a loss, if we can still see us play well, then that's all I ever ask for, and that's perfect. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for joining me. It's been a good pod. I've enjoyed it. It's good to see you, Stanton. Good to see you, Morgan. We'll be back. We'll be back with a reaction to this game with Frenchie. And speaking of Frenchie, thank you very much for producing it, and thank you all for listening. We appreciate your support. If you like what you hear, please tell your friends about us. We're on Spotify, we're on iTunes, we're on all the social media outlets. Please tell your friends and keep on supporting Fulham Focus. Bye for now.
Fulham.